Good evening and welcome to Pinpoint TV.
My name is Makosi Khabi.
And I am Olympia Bukakis. We're coming to you this evening from UFA Studios in Berlin.
Studio number 11.
Studio number 11.
And this is a part of the Soda Works Festival, celebrating 10 years of soda at the HZT.
Solo dance authorship for the uninitiated. Tonight we've been invited to be the moderators by the founders and former moderators of Pinpoint TV. We'd like to welcome them to the stage/set to
greenery.
Greenery. Come and have a chat with us.
I'd like to introduce Agatha and Diego.
So Agatha and Diego, would you like to tell us a little bit about the theme that you have in mind for this evening?
Diego, why don't you start?
Let me start then. On the occasion of the 10 years Soda Festival, we thought it would be very much more than convenient to create a frame for reflecting on education in the arts. And here we are. We have invited several people that are more or less concerned with institutional or non-institutional education. And we were also moved or driven by some fundamental questions, such as why institutional education at all in the arts? Like, why does it make sense to learn art through schools, through art schools? So what is the ultimate reason for somebody to attend an art school? Is it maybe because there are some kind of professional demands on legitimizing oneself throughout CV titles, accreditations, also to wear this cape of the legitimized artist? Is it also because of the networking, frames of visibility? Is it actually because you learn more things in an art school than outside an art school? So we have all these questions that we don't know yet what we think about them, but we will have the chance to approach them.
And because I see on the audience some former students, we will ask first of all about their future and how their future changed after the master, how the master degree changes the reality and how it positions us in the art market.
Fantastic, thank you very much. To go in further into the themes that you've outlined just there, we have 4 guests. We have several guests, but the first 4 we can introduce now. First up, we have Reece Martin from the HZT, the Hochschulübergreifendes Zentrum für Tanz, the Inter-University Center of Dance, the founder and head of the SODA program.
And our second guest is Gabby Buyer, who is the artistic director of ADA, which is also housed at the HZT at the UFA Studios.
We have Make Pereira, a current student of the SODA program.
And lastly but not least, we have Florian Segal,
former guest professor at the HZT in the BA program. First up, we're going to be asking you, we're going to be giving you a minute each. You'll get to talk afterwards as well, but to get the conversation rolling, as they say, we'll be giving you a minute each to speak on the question, why is an art school a necessary institution? I guess we'll invite Gabby Buyer to speak for a minute first on that question.
Or they could go ching chang chang and decide. I mean, no?
Do you want to
rock, paper, scissors? Who goes first now?
That's probably, good.
Yeah, you can go? Okay.
I can go.
I kind of want to play. No, okay, no, that's fine. Okay, so have we got our timer?
Yes.
Yep, great. Okay. Then Gabby Bio, why is an art school a necessary institution?
I must say I'm tempted to say I don't know. I think I can only tell you from my experience. I'm a dramaturg, and I knew from the first moment on I wanted to become a famous dramaturg, so I wanted to become the best one. But I needed the school to see what are the basics and to jump from there into destruction or chaos or whatever. But it helped me to see what is classical dramaturgy, or what are the basics in philosophy, whatever, to jump into life, into art life, whatever. And I can imagine it's a difference between master students and BA students, of course. But I can imagine that it's good to have some basics, whatever it is. We need to talk about it, but to have something in common, to learn on the same platform, to jump from there somewhere. So this, I don't have. Maybe we hear some other thoughts, but this would be my opinion.
Thank you very much, Gabby. Moving on, we'll go next to Maki Pereira.
Well, I think it's quite crucial to rethink like of an art school from our own individual perspectives. And so for me it would be important because it can be used as a platform that can offer you visibility in a way you want, and that in a way you can also be like you can share the experience with your peers, and that is quite remarkable. Like to get inspired, to get questioned, to get moved by your peers. Personally, I think that's quite moving about this platform.
Thank you. And I would like to invite Reece Martin to comment on that.
Well, I'm not so sure it's necessary. I do think it's useful. It's my experience that it's useful. And why is that? Well, I think a community or a society increasingly, but increasingly concerned with what can be economized, what can be bought, sold, utilized, or needs a venue where the useless or the not immediately useful, this is contradiction to what I just said, but sort of like can be open, sourced, can be sort of discussed and brought into social context as a way of redressing any kind of balances or we have that are forcing us to limit our thinking and our behavior to pure utilitarian concerns. So there are many ways of doing that. There can be sort of public discussion forums, there can be religious institutions, but I think an art and aesthetic institution is one way of opening, inviting us to think and consider how experience can be recontextualized, rethought, and reapproached through not necessarily cognitive, but as well as cognitive means, also sensorial, empirical experience. And so that would be the...
We'll have to come back to that one. Thank you very much, Reece. And Florian, how would you answer the question, why is an art school a necessary institution?
I think that above all, it gives time to people who don't really know what they want to do in the upcoming future. So I think like being here at a institution that is focused on dance, and I'm myself not being a dancer nor choreographer, but I think what we share is for people who are interested in art. Somehow interested in art, importantly, but can tell maybe yet what specifically, in what field exactly, in what function, if we have that. And then the most important thing, I think, is that it gives time to people to figure out.
So we're going to pose a number of questions to you, and sometimes individually, but like also feel free, any four of you, to answer that. One of the initial questions that we're thinking about is it at all possible to complete learning or to reach a certain level, for example, a master, in an artistic process or in an educational process in relation to the arts? So is it at all possible to reach this level, like a Master of Arts, for example? And how do we define that?
So maybe because I'm sort of in the institution, maybe I have a go at that. I mean, just the interesting thinking about the sort of it's an Anglo-Saxon sort of terminology, masters and bachelors, which is sort of also spread through the European Union recently as a result of your education reform. It's an interesting mixture when you think about it. I just thought about it now. A bachelor and master is not necessarily consequential. A bachelor is an unmarried man, actually. And a master is probably a cis white man, if I think about it in today's context. So it's very unusual terms to apply to standards of education. But let's say if we go beyond what it might mean now, there's sort of the idea that with a bachelor coming into, because it's 800 years of university tradition, coming into some sort of acquiring what is necessary to become a full person in that field. So to knowing what has already been discussed or what is considered to be known. A master's is then actually, or at least what we were required to tell people, that is the point where that being known, now one is invited to come to the other side of the table and begin to teach. So one acquires the capacity to be able to be an expert in one's own field. And a master is to be able to not only know that knowledge, to be able to disseminate it and teach it. And I think this is not just in art schools, it's across the university or across the teaching platform. And not only that, but also to be able to engage in research and to be able to contribute to the formulation or the development of new research. This then goes on to third stream when we become a PhD, which is the third jump in the line, where it is purely the acquisition of so-called new knowledge. But a master is not only being someone who is an expert in the field of knowledge that they choose to be in, but someone who is also capable of setting up questioning, research into that field and contributing to it.
Now, Maki, as someone who's currently in this process of becoming a master of the arts, how much do you think that this applies to, like, for example, your practice? Like, how much do you think that the idea that you can reach a level of being a master of Maki's practice, how do you see that interacting with you on a personal and a professional level?
Well, I don't necessarily think that it's something that you achieve and then it's done. Like, it's a continuous work in progress. Like, you always find new questions and new things to develop. And in this sense, like the point that just Florian made about having time for developing your whatever it is you want to find or whatever it is you want to be more mastered on. I think it's very important to keep on having the freshness of I'm not in a road that has an end, but I'm on a road of finding tools to improve myself in terms of, okay, I have a new things coming on to me every time. Okay, I have new I don't know, questions. I have new nuances that can be triggering my work now. And how do I respond to it? This is, I think, what I can find inside a master program, like how to become better at answering whatever I have in front every time I go through a new work, or like, I don't know, it's as life itself, you know, you cannot see clearly when you're like so embedded into what you're doing, but how to become more aware about the situation that is surrounding you. I think that's what is more important here, like how to be able to answer to what is happening in the process you want to work on.
This just brings me to a question, I think, because in the time and the process of what you're working on, you're working in an institution. This is open to all 4 guests. Did you see a problem in the institutionalization of an art education? Like with the idea that if, Florian, you go that you have time, but the time is seems to be within the confines of the program and within the confines of the institution. Is there, what are the positives and the negatives of this situation?
Well, I think like coming to this point of time where we are living in times where even that is commodified very strongly, and if I talk about time, it's like empty time. It's not like going from assessment to assessment, and it's like, I mean, nowadays we are in a situation where I think this time as a utopian material almost is getting more and more scarce, and also like we are talking about education. I think that's where we should start with our critique. I am not a great fan of education. I would think we should go from education towards relation, like relating to the people around and figuring out. Now, nevertheless, what I think it's very worthwhile to sharpen the tools you're dealing with. So if we are at a dance institution, we should be very clear that it's dance as like in a very broad understanding, physicality, movement, choreography, and even like a lot of like technical aspects, and then like but also, as I said, the broad understanding, bodies moving in space. That this means it's the body that's asking the questions through physicality, and potentially the body itself might be the site where those questions are asked. And this is something to be said maybe easily, but it like means a lot of doing, of like spending time with your body, with other bodies, and also what Rhys said. It's very worthwhile to look into what has happened already. And so I think that it's those two things. Like it's good to know what was there, because it's more of the same. It's a shame, more of the same. Like that would be wasting our time. Like, I mean, we shouldn't be too economic about it, but we should take care that we don't have too many holes in our pockets, and it's just like going away. And most importantly, we shouldn't have like others ruling and saying like how to spend our time, but to create an awareness of that. You have to work hard and be very sensitive, and potentially like physically very sensitive. And this means refinement, more and more refinement, because if not, like you're just around and you're doing something. Talking about aesthetic experience, like what makes an aesthetic experience an aesthetic one, and not just any experience. And this is where it comes to the. But I believe it's not through education that you can tell, like, okay, do like this and then it's this and that, but it's through relation and finding out.
Then I'd like to ask the others, then taking on what you said about education and relation, what are the limitations of the institutionalization of the relation that's involved in this artistic education?
Can I jump into that?
Yes.
Okay. So I think it's quite difficult to, even when arts are believed to be so open and so like being shared from a personal necessity of, like some personal necessity, let's say, but it's not that the art institution or the art school can escape from the hierarchies that are embedded in the systems itself, like throughout the world, like our societies are ruled by hierarchies. So I think that this is something that is very difficult to escape when it comes to answer in terms of what kind of aesthetics are we as like people studying are looking for and aiming for achieving. Who are the ones that are there to mentor us? Who are the ones that are there to say, hey, you could come from like look at this that you want to do from this perspective or from this perspective. And I think that is very difficult to escape these hierarchies. I think that it would be great to think more and more of educators are just like mediums, you know, like, okay, I will mediate and help you find whatever you want to find. And this is a hard work to do, because I think that this kind of thing, like who is grading and who is there to be graded, it's already some kind of a hierarchy. So I think that this is quite problematic also in terms of what kind of aesthetics you want to pull off from your practice, because it's definitely linked to this grading system also, I would say.
I'm interested in, Gabby, in your thoughts on the limitations of an art education.
I thought, listening to what you guys were saying, I think there is, of course, there's a limitation, but what is the advantage to setting a frame within your researching, working? I have more the feeling that's why I'm really interested in talking about relating instead of educating. It's more giving an offer and other people taking the offer. And in between, it's all about negotiation, for my taste. I'm not that deep into it, but what I heard and what I see and whom I know, I think it's about, of course, if you don't have an institution, you are quite free, whatever it is. And for me, the advantage is to have this frame within everybody's researching, and in this frame, you go into negotiation about content, aesthetics, whatever.
Can I say something?
Yes.
So, it's a short evening and it's a long topic, so I'm just trying to work out what to say. I think we have to sort of like consider in this conversation, if we're going to have this conversation, questions of things like what a qualification is. The difference between a residency and an educational program or learning program. A residency where you can enter into a program and the community gives you license, facilities to be able to ask whatever you want to ask, with whom you ever want to ask according to final situations, with no restrictions, apart from the restrictions you place yourself, or maybe there's some theme or something like that. Residencies are very different. An education, so what we call education or relational program, has a different set of responsibilities traditionally in terms of the community. So what is the educational program doing? What does education try and do? It tries to qualify us. No? Maybe it's not a good system, but let's say it tries to qualify us to do things, no? And to do things with trust, so that other people can trust us to do those things, or can rely on us to do those things, with competence, with integrity, with capacity. And let's leave the art school thing out a minute, but if you say, I'd like to think when I go to the doctor or the dentist that these people are qualified to walk around in my mouth or cut bits out of me, and that someone has gone to the trouble to make sure they know what they're doing. So that's there. Or if I'm living in a house and I want to make sure that this house doesn't fall down on top of me, or the road doesn't, the holes don't open up in front of me. So there's a whole bunch of professional qualifications, which are very easy to sort of measure in terms of why they would be qualified, why someone would be certified to have the authority to do this. It gets really kind of interesting when you move into something like art school education, where that's not immediately so apparent, that you sort of that you're keeping people out of danger, or that you are actually qualifying people through people who know how to do these things, who have practiced, who have themselves learned how to do things, to go into a field now where that field itself is actually questioned. Right? So, which is like in an art school community, which is actually not only now asking what should be taught, but how should be taught, what the subject is taught, and that is actually risking implosion to actually dissolve itself through its own interrogations. So I think that we just need to sort of have that kind of conversation is, okay, if it is relation, if it's something like this, what is that doing? What is the notion of authority? And we're here because we're in SODA, and one of the key words in that program for me was authorship. And in the word authorship is the word author, and connected to the word author is authority. So who has the authority, and what do we mean by authority, to say anything about anything? So I think maybe we could have a conversation about what authority we think is, what is the context of authority in relation to relation? How do we establish qualification? How do we establish credentials? Do we want to remove credentials entirely from the discussion and say it doesn't matter if you are qualified to do anything, because we want to remove hierarchies? So if we set up a flat ontology of our so-called hierarchy-free system, who decides who gets in, who decides who gets what, who decides who has access to which economical means, who has access to other people and other means, and how does that proceed? I think I think we should talk about some of those things if we are proposing a change. And I'm certainly not defending a dictatorial educational system that's purely concerned with stuffing information into people who seem not, or it is assumed, are empty.
I think, yeah, you raise an interesting point, Rhys. I think the reason that we wanted to ask about the limitations of like the institutionalization of an art education is to work in contrast, so that we've got a basic sort of set of ideas from which to broaden the discussion. So we talk about why it is necessary to have this, what are the limitations, and then now it's time for boiling point.